Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 26.5 released to the public about 2 weeks ago, and there's even more to talk about since the iOS 26.5 is out what's new video. We'll talk about the latest features, we'll talk about the latest Apple news, and we'll talk about the overall experience, where at this point there's really no excuse how it's performing for many people when it comes to lag, battery life, and more. And to jump to any specific point of the video, be sure to check out the chapters in the description. Now, of course, we'll talk about my experience, but we'll talk about your experience based off the YouTube community poll on the post page, where at the time of this video there's over 16,000 votes and 279 comments. I've gone over all the comments to determine what the update is like for most of us, so be sure to stick around toward the end of the video where I'll read some of your comments as well. But first, let's start with news. Now, iPhone 17 Pro is going to be used to live broadcast the Major League Soccer match between the LA Galaxy and the Houston Dynamo FC. Apple published an announcement about this, saying Apple TV to broadcast first major professional live sporting event shot entirely on iPhone 17 Pro. So that's pretty impressive. We're definitely at the point where you could use this for broadcast or just creating YouTube videos as well. Apple also shared an update on the App Store on how they have now stopped over $2.2 billion in fraudulent transactions last year. Again, you'll see on the newsroom, the App Store stopped over $2.2 billion potentially fraudulent transactions, and you can see more information about it where they've stopped this with different protections they have in place, reviewing apps, and much more. Also, as of Thursday, May 21st, the hearing test feature and sleep apnea alerts are now available in India on supported devices. Again, according to a post from Apple on their newsroom, where it says groundbreaking health features available today on Apple Watch and AirPods Pro. So it's great to see this being approved more and more places throughout the world. Of course, local governments have to approve this, and it's now approved in India. So if you have a supported device, I'll link this article in the description so you can check it out as well as far as availability. Samsung has now officially overtaken Apple as the leader in smartphone customer satisfaction. This comes from the American Customer Satisfaction Index's 2026 Telecommunications Cell Phone and Smartwatch study. Samsung ranks just 1 point ahead of Apple at 81, where Apple ranks at 80, and given all the issues with iOS, this doesn't really surprise me as Samsung makes solid hardware and One UI has come a long way. You'll see I'm running One UI 9, I've been using it, it's super smooth, and this is in beta form, where One UI 8.5 is equally as fast and smooth. That doesn't mean it's without issues, but it's definitely a smoother experience and more stable at this point. So hopefully Apple will jump back up and get things right. But at this point, it doesn't really surprise me. Apple announced the finalists for their design awards for WWDC 2026. You can see it on the developer website, and it says introducing the 2026 Apple Design Award finalists. They do this every year, and you can see all of the finalists and download the different apps. I'll link it in the description, but there's lots of things from productivity apps to games and much more. Also, another thing Apple published this week is the first features officially coming to iOS 27. And as always, they show accessibility features coming soon for Accessibility Awareness Day. However, Dylan on X actually suggested that since the new voiceover controls that I've talked about that Apple mentions here utilize the understanding of natural language, Siri could also do the same and be an AI agent. So this definitely could be a preview of what to expect with Siri 2.0. If we scroll down, basically Apple shows that you can use your voice with natural language and just say, open the orange folder, and it understands it and then opens it. So that seems like something that definitely could be possible with Siri as well. Many who watched the video of iOS 27 that I posted have said that they can't wait for the captions feature to be on the home videos and throughout iOS. As I mentioned in that video, if we go into the TV app and maybe you're playing a movie, and within F1 you'll see here that we can go to subtitles and of course select the language and style. So this is coming throughout iOS 27 where you'll be able to use it on home videos and any different app that's actually talking. It will interpret it in real time into multiple languages as well. Now, the most asked for feature is still split view according to many of your comments in that video, and also updates to the keyboard, so we'll see if Apple actually does this on June 8th at WWDC. When it comes to app updates this week, there's quite a few to talk about. The first one has to do with sports. Apple pushed out the update 3 days ago to version 4.0, and it says everything you need to follow World Cup 2026. You'll see it says now fans all over the world can use Apple Sports to get real-time updates on their favorite teams and leagues. This is because Apple pushed this out to over 90 different countries. So they made an announcement, they've pushed out Apple Sports, so it should be available in many more places around the world now. Also, they updated the Apple Store app. So you'll see 23 hours ago, they just updated it with various improvements and performance enhancements, and there were quite a few updates to WhatsApp. Some of them are in testing though, so if we go to WA beta info, you can see some here, where if we scroll down, it says WhatsApp enhances media sharing with a redesigned attachment sheet on Android. So that's something that could be coming very soon, and there's also testing things where messages would disappear on their own. So again, WA beta info is posting that, where WhatsApp is testing new options for disappearing messages. After you've viewed the message, it will give you a timer and then start to disappear. So this is something that's being updated and hopefully will show up very soon. Discord also got a major update this week where it's now end-to-end encrypted on voice and video calls by default. This is across all of its supported platforms from PC to Xbox and PlayStation. So make sure that you've updated, and it's now end-to-end encryption where we're seeing different apps get rid of it, such as maybe Instagram, for example. So it looks like they're making a big push towards privacy. Now also I have a Discord community that I've linked in the description below if you want to check that out as well. And a couple other things to mention when it comes to gaming. Nintendo is releasing a new game on May 30th called Pictonico. That's similar to WarioWare, but instead uses your own photos to create the mini-games. So that should be fun, definitely worth trying out. Also, Fortnite is now back on the App Store everywhere. You can see they actually announced it. Fortnite is back on the App Store around the world as the final battle approaches. So that's available if you play Fortnite. Now, it's been a couple weeks since I mentioned a weekly iOS tip, and this week I wanted to share one to help you better get together with your friends and family. So maybe you're getting together very soon and someone's asking where you are. There's a quick way to send them your location. Go to the Maps app, press and hold or haptic press, and then go to Send My Location. Once you tap on Send My Location, you'll see it says Aaron Zolo's location. I can airdrop it, send it via message, mail, or notes, or other apps as well. So this quickly lets someone know exactly where you are, and of course you can send an ETA if you have directions to somewhere as well. When it comes to the iPhone 17 series, it seems to be one of the best-selling iPhones of all time, and I was just curious which version you're using, whether that's the iPhone 17 Pro Max, the iPhone 17 Pro, the regular iPhone 17, or the iPhone Air. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below, as many people suspect the iPhone 17 Pro is the best-selling, but it's hard to say whether it's the Pro or the Pro Max. But again, let me know in the comments below, or if you went with the iPhone 17, that's a great phone as well. Now, when it comes to releases this week, there's a couple worth talking about. So if we go into Safari, Apple released a new Safari technology preview like they do every couple weeks. It's now version 244, and it's available for macOS Tahoe or macOS Sequoia. You can test the latest technologies and updates, so be sure to update it if you're checking those out. As far as other things, well, Apple stopped signing iOS 26.4.2. This makes me think we're going to see an iOS 26.5.1 as soon as next week. Mac rumors also confirm that they're seeing it in their analytics, so it makes sense that maybe we could see it next week or the following week before WWDC. So that's what I would expect, as you can no longer downgrade past iOS 26.5. Of course, after iOS 26.5.1, many people are wondering where is iOS 26.6 Beta 1. Typically every year after the public update comes out, such as 26.5, we don't see an update until after WWDC. So maybe on the 15th or 16th, we could see iOS 26.6 Beta 1, and of course that will run concurrently, where Apple will show off iOS 27 on June 8th, we'll get iOS 27 Beta 1 typically, and then we'll have both betas throughout the summer. So we'll typically have a public beta around the 1st of July, with a public release of iOS 27 in September, and then Apple will pretty much do away with iOS 26 and just release minor updates after that. So that's typically what we expect every year, and of course they'll keep updating iOS 18 with iOS 18.7.9 or iOS 18.8. When it comes to the experience this week, let's first start with AirPods. Now, this does not make a lot of sense with the AirPods Pro 3, but they have been terrible for me this week. Connecting to the Mac, trying to edit videos with them, disconnecting on their own. I don't know what the difference is. There really hasn't been any change, but for whatever reason, it's been pretty terrible. And many of you have said the same thing. So it's very odd that this is happening, but I have had them where they just disconnect. Or I was using them the other day, editing a video, and all of a sudden one of them would start to drop out. They would degrade or sort of lose connection, then reconnect, then stop altogether. I'd have to place them back in the case, close the case, reopen it, place them back in my ears, and then it would finally work. It was so bad I actually just stopped using them, placed them back in the case, and used the speakers from the studio display. So I'm not sure what's going on. I've been using the AirPods Max 2 wired because this has become such an issue. I typically prefer to use the AirPods Pro 3, and I just can't at this point. They constantly disconnect. When it comes to the iOS 18.7.9 experience, not a single one of you commented that you're actually using it. That's because Apple made it difficult to install if you're on a device that supports iOS 26. So it's only supported on the iPhone XS, XS Max, and XR. So unfortunately, Apple's back at it again, as I mentioned last week, where they're not allowing people to upgrade because they want to push you to iOS 26. And I really think they should just make the security updates available for those that want to stay on iOS 18. When it comes to the iOS 26.5 experience, well, it's been a very downhill experience over the past week. Right away, it seemed much better, but now at this point, there's just no excuse for how it's behaving, as I mentioned earlier. It's been a pretty bad experience, at least over time, and restarts do seem to fix some of the issues, but first let's talk about what's fixed. Many of you say the keyboard is much better. So in Apple Notes, we'll just try it out. It's been fine usually on the newer devices, but this is iOS 26.5 on iPhone 17 Pro Max. And you'll see it works okay for me, but some people say there's lag there and it's just become unresponsive. Also, people have said that iCloud backup is working properly again, so that's great. That is something that they've fixed, and it's very smooth, at least for some of the newer devices and even some of the older devices from time to time, but then it slows down. So sometimes it's fixed, sometimes it's not. It really depends on who you ask, and we'll talk about which devices have different problems in a little bit here. As far as bugs, I've actually listed them this time in the most mentioned to least mentioned based on the comments. The first issue mentioned is heat issues and battery drain. Now these are related as sometimes they go back and forth where the processor is working really hard. Of course, that's going to heat everything up, and then your battery's going to drain faster. So before we talk about more bugs, instead of talking about battery and heat later, let's take a look at it right now. So just using it in this video, it's a little bit warm to the touch, nothing unusual. In fact, it's been staying nice and cool for me, but battery hasn't been great. But let's go ahead and run benchmarks, and then we'll go ahead and see the thermals and talk about battery. Now I have two iPhone 17 Pro Max running both iOS 26.5. Let's go ahead and take a look with the thermal camera, and they should be about the same, but we have about 36 degrees Celsius on the one on the right, and then on the one on the left, we have about 32 degrees Celsius for some reason. Now, I haven't been using this as much, and of course, there's not as much going on in the background as I don't have my keys set up, so those type of things make a bit of a difference where I'm not using my car keys with this one, I am with this one, and it's probably working a little bit more. Now we'll take a look at benchmarks in just a moment, but first let's take a look at battery life. Thanks to Victor for sending this in. This is on an iPhone 17 Pro Max with 100% battery health, and you'll see he had to charge it twice, but he had 6 hours and 5 minutes of screen active time, 6 hours and 41 minutes of screen idle time, and used 62% of the battery, so not very good, at least for him. Thanks to Abhishek for sending this in. This is on an iPhone 16e running iOS 26.5 with 94% battery health. You'll see he had 5 hours and 7 minutes of screen on time, 56 minutes of screen off time, and used 60% of the battery. So similar to what we saw in the 17 Pro Max, about the same. This is actually pretty good for a 16e though. When it comes to battery life for me, if we go into settings, then battery health, I'm at 100% capacity with 89 cycles, and today so far has been the best battery. So far, 3 hours and 4 minutes of screen active time, 18 minutes of screen idle time using 34% of the battery. But if we go back just a day, only 2 hours and 16 minutes of screen active time using 54% of the battery. The previous day, about the same. I'm not getting more than about 6 hours of screen on time. Now that's decent for me, but still not great and definitely unacceptable for many people. And again, there's no excuse why Apple can't fix this. It just looks like maybe they're waiting for iOS 27. Now, when it comes to the comments, I went through all of them, like I mentioned, and 68% of you now say that battery is bad or worse than previous updates. Only 32% say it's better, which is the lowest I think we've ever seen. Also, I searched online in multiple places and found about the same split where 60% find it to be worse or bad at this point. So definitely something Apple needs to work on. Now going back to the rest of the bugs, so as I mentioned, the first bugs were heat issues and battery drain. The second bug mentioned was screen lag. So in particular for me, let me go ahead and lock the phone, almost dropped it there, swipe up, scroll over, and it lags almost every single time. For a while this went away, but now it's back. So even after restarting, it returns after a little while. Going into different pages, you'll see it just lags again and again for no reason whatsoever. Also, some see lag in keyboards, like I mentioned before. Now for the number 3 most mentioned bug, people updating to iOS 26.5 said that it wiped their custom Safari preferences, or automatically toggles on files and folder permissions for photos. So that's a bit odd, and I've mentioned that tip before for helping out with 120 Hz scrolling in Safari settings. So if we go into Safari, I'll go into my quick settings here. It's a shortcut I link in the description. So it brings us right into settings. And if we go to the bottom here, go to advanced, and then we go to the bottom again, go to feature flags, and let me find it here. So under Safari, under the WebKit feature flags, turn off prefer page rendering updates near 60 frames per second. That makes it a little bit smoother within Safari. Now for the number 4 most mentioned issue, well, that would be CarPlay. There's been many disconnects, and also song titles are behind for some. I've actually had a ton of disconnects this past week for some reason. It was fine to start with, but now, yesterday, I had it disconnect right after I started my vehicle. Then it would reconnect, then I was driving down the road, the song would start to play, and then it disconnected again. The only way to fix it was to actually go in, turn off Bluetooth, turn it back on, and then it reconnected normally. I haven't had this many issues with it before, and many people are saying they're having frequent Bluetooth dropouts as well. The number 5th mentioned issue is apps freezing and crashing. Now, some of that comes down to the developer not updating them, but going into different apps. If they're first-party apps, of course, that's on Apple, but with third-party apps, they may need to update it, but we're seeing more and more of these crashes for some reason. Of course, the wallpaper bug is still there, and the wallpaper bug is the 6th most mentioned issue. You'll see it's nice and vibrant, swipe home, and it desaturates again. I thought they fixed it, but it's returned. Also, the 7th most mentioned issue is iCloud message sync delays. The 8th most mentioned is the camera not opening. In fact, I actually heard from my sister. She went into the camera, it would just go to a black screen. In order to fix this, she couldn't even reboot it to fix it, close the app. After updating to iOS 26.5, it just wouldn't work. The only way to fix it was to use a third-party app, such as Halide Camera or something like that. So that's a bit unfortunate and definitely an issue. Also, the 9th most reported issue is connectivity not being stable or having worse signal strength. I haven't experienced that myself as far as signal strength, but connectivity is hit or miss, it seems. When it comes to how iOS 26.5 is holding up on old and new devices, well, the iPhone 17 series we'll start with has the most reports about the update being buggy or sluggish. So that's an issue for many, where I've shown that already, and also poor RAM management. I've noticed that, again, after a week or so of use. Going back into YouTube, you'll see it reloaded from earlier in the video. So definitely an issue from time to time. When it comes to the iPhone 16 series devices, we're hearing a lot of people are having issues with the phone getting hot, with thermals, and that doesn't surprise me too much as we don't have a vapor chamber and it's made out of titanium, so it doesn't dissipate heat as well as the new phones. However, the non-Pro models report a very smooth experience, and you'll see that's a theme throughout. Now, when it comes to the iPhone 15 series, it's much smoother now than it was a week ago for many people. However, it's worse battery for many on the 15 series. When it comes to the iPhone 14, again, the base models report the best experience, where the Pro users complain of micro stuttering or apps freezing. And when it comes to the other models, with the iPhone 13, 12, and 11, well, they're basically having a very smooth experience with decent battery life, according to most people that posted anyway. So that's not the case for everyone, but for whatever reason, it seems they refined some of the older models here. When it comes to performance, well, I've mentioned some of this already, where it's a little bit sluggish from time to time. Typically when you unlock the phone and swipe up, sometimes it stutters. However, ProMotion seems to be okay for many. Some people are annoyed that it caps itself sometimes at 80 Hz. However, this is variable, and Apple never said it was 120 Hz all the time. So again, if we go into maybe Safari here and scroll, oftentimes it's nice and smooth, especially if you enable that option that I mentioned earlier or change that option. So the experience varies, of course, but there's definitely some bugs that need to be worked out here. When it comes to benchmarks, like I mentioned, I ran them earlier while we tested thermals, and they're okay. So let's go to our CPU benchmarks and take a look at the most recent. I had 3,775 for single core on my main phone here, 9,685 for multi-core. No real surprise as the other one is faster, even though it's the same operating system and same phone, but I have seen better scores up to 10,072, so it just depends when you run it and how many times you run it, so it can vary greatly depending on what you're doing. Now, as far as if you should install iOS 26.5, well, if you already have, definitely, and also for those security updates, I've mentioned those before. And on their security release website, I won't go over all of them, but you'll see there's over 50 of them. So that's an important reason to update, and it definitely seems better than previous ones. But if you're on iOS 26.4.2 or earlier, some people have said it has better battery life, like I mentioned. So at this point, things have changed a little bit. I would recommend installing it for the security updates, but hopefully we get iOS 26.5.1 soon to fix all of these little issues here. Now, as far as the overall experience and what you had to say, let's take a look at some of your comments. Charlie Copley says, iPhone 16 Pro Max seems to be running warmer than usual for me. Lokman Syed says, iOS 26.5 has been the buggiest update ever on my iPhone 17 Pro Max Deep Blue. Overheating issues, lag and stuttering, sluggishness across different UIs, keyboard is very slow to type on, my phone has a weird issue where the microphone is always on and generates a significant amount of heat even though I haven't used it. RAM management has gotten worse as well. Battery life was really good at the beginning, but now is very horrible. This makes me think maybe you have VoiceOver enabled, which would keep that microphone enabled all the time, so be sure to check those accessibility features. Owen M. Lipka 23 says, iOS 26.5 on my iPhone 15 Pro has been a lot better than any of the 26.4 updates. Mainly, it would barely last the day with about 4 hours of screen on time, battery health at 87% with about 300 cycles. Now on 26.5, I usually end the day above 30%. It's also a significantly smoother experience throughout the whole OS. Also, I had issues with maps, the lock screen, and autocorrect. Now they all function much better in this update. FR4N7702 said, battery life is very inconsistent for me on iPhone 14 Pro. Sometimes I get 6 hours of screen time and it's at 40%, other times it's already dead. With the same usage, social media, no games. Caracas7326 said, on iPhone 17 base, it has been pretty good as far as performance goes. There is still a bug where the clock overlaps sometimes with the widgets if you have always on display on occasionally, and battery usage I have noticed has been a tad weirder this time, although that might just be me. Overall good, but could be a tad better, definitely expecting a 26.5.1 or something. When it comes to iOS 18, there's still quite a few holdouts at this point. I don't blame a lot of you wanting to just stay where something is stable, but just make sure that you have the latest security updates on iOS 18 so that everything is secure on your iPhone. But I'm glad to hear it's working well for you. However, at the same time last year, iOS 18.5 had a lot of complaints as well. So it does take a while for Apple to get this right, and hopefully with iOS 27 it fixes most of those issues. With iOS 26.5, it's honestly not good enough. I would give it a C as far as its ranking at this point, maybe even a C-, where iOS 26.5 is highly inconsistent as far as an update and causes widespread overheating for some and severe battery drain for many, or more than 2/3 of the users discussing it at least. This is especially on the high-end Pro Max models for some reason, and while a smaller portion of the community reports a smooth experience with improved battery life, many others are plagued with persistent interface stuttering like I showed you, keyboard lag, and frustrating CarPlay synchronization bugs. Apple will hopefully step it up with iOS 27, as I think many people are getting quite frustrated at this point, and again, it really doesn't surprise me that Samsung has overtaken iPhone in satisfaction lately. So let me know what you think of that in the comments below. So that's everything with iOS 26.5. Hopefully we see an iOS 26.5.1 soon to resolve issues on both old and new phones alike. However, I much suspect Apple's working on iOS 27 more than iOS 26 at this point, and that's probably where we'll see the most refinements and updates. So let me know your experience though in the comments below, what version you're using and what device as well. Of course, I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.